Hello, I'm Dr. Kristen Lorenz, and thank you for joining me today. We've had a tumultuous week here in Arizona and in Tucson. We seem to have sort of a trifecta here, with the dramatically rising numbers of coronavirus cases and hospitalizations, the racial protesting across the world, and the Bighorn fire encroaching on our Sonoran Desert and our city, requiring many to evacuate their homes. Each one of these situations is stressful for us, but the coincidental nature of them can be overwhelming. Today, I will talk about how to stay informed during this time of uncertainty and change while managing the agitation, the frustration, and anxiety that too much news can create. Many would agree that the racial protests have become very peaceful, and we can all feel comforted by that. I also have spoken with several of you who clearly feel emotionally soothed by attending some of those peaceful gatherings, and that is important. But large groups of people gathering in close proximity, often passionately singing and yelling, can increase the chance of coronavirus transmission. Many wear face masks and maintain 6-foot distancing, and I thank them. But as your physician, I also worry about many at the large gatherings, as I know that not all are behaving most responsibly. As we progress through the next few months of the coronavirus pandemic, and especially in light of the recent resurgence, we realize that this is an unprecedented time, with no prior model to follow. Trying to balance economic issues and the safety of our community is surely complex, and as such, there are countless opinions, resulting in a flood of news feeds. So how do we stay informed without being overwhelmed, confused, and stressed by the incessant flow of news reports? How do we continue to make the best decisions for ourselves based on facts? Who really do we trust? There's so much that we don't know about this virus at this point, and when the level of uncertainty is high, our brains naturally drive us to seek as much information as possible in order for us to feel more in control. So let's talk about the news and some of the facts and myths. First, you can never get too much news. More is better. Depression or anxiety doesn't result from news. News doesn't cause normally happy people to feel anxious or depressed. A recent study found that 7 out of 10 Americans feel the need to take breaks from coronavirus news, and 4 out of 10 report feeling worse emotionally as a result of following the news. 2 issues which can result from too much news. First, coronavirus fatigue, and that term may be familiar to you as it's similar to quarantine fatigue, which I discussed in my blog a few weeks ago. We can become numb to the number of cases, hospitalizations, and deaths related to COVID-19 and fail to translate them into important, healthy, personal choices and behavior. Indeed, the opening of our state has increased these numbers, and this was somewhat expected. But it is clear that the dramatic surge that we're currently experiencing is the result of relaxed practices of individuals in public spaces. Despite the rising numbers, there are fewer face masks and less physical distancing. The second result of too much news is the exacerbation of anxiety and depression in those who may have a history of emotional health issues, and an increase in restlessness, irritability, and overwhelm in those who are generally stable and okay. Anxiety looks at the possible and focuses on it and amplifies it rather than the probable. Those with anxiety may read a factual article about coronavirus and have a hard time not going down the rabbit hole of all the worst case scenarios. They are less able to hold the difficulties of this time, along with the hopefulness and the greatest probability that we will come through this and emerge a more informed, empowered, and connected world. And some with anxiety are more susceptible to feeling the pain of others who have lost their lives or lost loved ones in this crisis. This group seems particularly apt to rehearse in their minds the painful scenarios and feel compelled to watch more news as they erroneously believe that it will relieve their anxiety. Those with depression may become more withdrawn, switch off, and become more apathetic with too much exposure to discord in the news. In all of these groups, visualizing the news with video, or photographs exacerbates anxiety and depression, sadness and anger more intensely than listening to it or reading it. A study in 2011 by the British Journal of Psychology found that the stress effects of negative news were evident after only 14 minutes of watching. And let's not forget the effect of stress on the immune system. It weakens our acute immune response, so feeling fearful and stressed about coronavirus can actually make us more vulnerable to catching it. The bottom line here is respect for this virus, practice those behaviors which best protect us, and proceed with confidence. Face masks, physical distancing, hand washing, hand sanitizers, avoiding touching public surfaces whenever possible, avoid touching our faces with unwashed hands are proven to be powerful behaviors. Practicing them equip us well. News is factual and trustworthy. Sometimes. Not all journalism is good. But that doesn't mean that all news sources are bad. It's important to choose your information source wisely. The source should be fact-based and make you feel informed. Specifically for coronavirus information, I continue to recommend the CDC, the World Health Organization, and the Pima County Health Department for more local information. News teaches critical thinking. Again, it depends on your source. Often information is fed to us in such a way that we are looped into a belief or understanding which is incomplete. This occurs more often when we are isolated and do not discuss current issues with family or close friends. Talking to others about the news is sometimes helpful in seeing multiple perspectives and is healthy for our emotional well-being. But sometimes it can cause conflict, and this can increase emotional burden. Until now, it's been quite easy to let everyone be themselves, make their own decisions, and live their lives their way. But now there's a little gray area. The behavior of others can affect us. If your brother-in-law doesn't believe that social distancing or wearing a mask is important, and that getting back to BC normal or before coronavirus normal is the most important goal, then his behavior might affect your health if you continue to choose to socialize with him physically. And whether or not you're in alignment with friends and family with these issues, it may be important to recognize how you interact with them. You may want to limit discussion of the pandemic and actively choose other topics to discuss and connect with. Perhaps sharing about the book that you're reading or hobbies you're engaged in or have in common can be like a breath of fresh air. News helps us to make better personal choices. Maybe. It depends on your source. After viewing or reading a news piece, it might be helpful for you to ask yourself, do I feel an increased sense of community, connection, and a shared humanity? Or increased feelings of anxiety and despair? If news isn't providing you with information on how to best stay safe, it may be contributing to stress and fear. The fortunate among us recognize that news is to the mind as comfort food is to the body. The way the media feeds us news, it's easy to digest and can help us to feel less anxious in the short run. But with too much, ultimately it leaves us feeling more lonely, angry, and hopeless. So how do we balance news fatigue with the need to remain informed on the latest guidelines and laws or healthcare and job recommendations during this evolving crisis? One recurrent recommendation is to check news headlines once a day, either online or tune into the opening of the daily news for the bulletin. That may be reduced to once a week for those prone to anxiety and ruminating. And for some, it might be best to avoid consuming news altogether and have a trusted buddy digest and filter information for you, as long as they're following reliable journalism sources. Those who have practiced these boundaries report feeling calmer and more focused and productive in their work and home lives. It's also important to focus on the news when you're checking in and not combine it with other activities such as eating or work. Last week we discussed mindful eating, and eating while watching or listening to the news is a sure way to overeat or to disrupt your digestion and your digestive health. And focusing on the facts helps you to process the information consciously rather than unconsciously react emotionally to it, which can result in increased stress. Checking in at a regular time each day can be less stressful as well, and it can help you to maintain a routine. An easy way to get the headlines is by asking your home smart speaker system, like Amazon Echo or Google Home, to tell you the news of the day. That robotic and detached delivery seems to help us focus on the facts. Many major newspapers have online newsletters or apps which give factual rundown of the daily headlines as well. Avoid news altogether after 5 or 6 p.m., as you don't want to be processing it as you go to bed. This is clearly linked to insomnia and poor sleep quality. And from here, the cycle of stress, anxiety, low mood, and irritability can be generated. If you're active on social media, do not hesitate to remove any anxiety-provoking feeds. If people you're following are posting upsetting opinions, mute or hide their posts. Everyone is different, and creating your personal information pathway is important as we proceed into and through the next few months. And don't forget that list of soothing and enjoyable distractions we mentioned last week. Keep fun reading material, puzzles, and games handy so that you can quickly get away from the pressure of too much news or discussion of it when you need to. And again, it's very important to remember that this is a time-limited situation. Though the exact time is somewhat unknown, it's very helpful to find things to look forward to when the pandemic passes. Make plans and talk about them often, because this will pass and those plans will be realized. In the meantime, I wish you safety, peace, and contentment, and I hope you see humor and beauty every day. Thank you. Bye-bye.